Hey, this is Mr. Swift, part of the Bike STEM class. I'm here to show you really quick, as quick as possible, how to draw a bike frame using those dimensions that we got from that bike, the Spot Rocker size medium.
Your drawing, you're going to need a couple things. You'll need your paper protractor, or real protractor if you want. You'll need some sort of straight edge, something that just doesn't have to be a ruler, but it's just something long that has a nice straight edge to it. You'll need your tape measure. You'll need maybe a marker, colored pencil, and definitely a regular pencil. And then you're going to need your sheet with all your dimensions on it.
So first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line connecting our two axles together. This line is just going to be a really long line across a piece of paper, and for this line I'm going to start about a third of the way up on my paper. So right about here I'm going to just draw as horizontal a line as I can, and my straight edge is definitely not long enough to cross this whole piece of paper, so I'm going to just lightly draw a horizontal line, and this will be kind of where our axles will land. And I don't necessarily know how long my first dimension is, but all I did is started with a line that goes all the way across. Now I'm going to, the very first dimension we're going to do is the wheelbase. So I'm going to try to keep track of everything that we draw up here on the board. So first thing is the wheelbase. And the wheelbase on this bike is 1,177 millimeters. So I'm going to use kind of a darker marker. I'm going to put my rear axle on there with a big dot, and then I'm going to use my tape measure, my little tape measure, and I'm going to measure out 1,177 millimeters. So starting there, going along my axle line, my horizontal line, 1,177 millimeters is right about here. So these two blue dots, this is my wheelbase. So I've got that dimension done. Now the next thing after my wheelbase is I'm going to draw my bottom bracket drop. The bottom bracket drop on these bikes is 50 millimeters. So all I'm going to do now is take my tape measure. I'm going to measure down off this line somewhere, it doesn't matter where, but I'm going to measure down 50 millimeters. Right here, I'm going to find another spot somewhere, measure down off that line 50 millimeters. And all that has done is that's given me a parallel line that's 50 millimeters now. So I will use my straight edge and connect those two dots. So that's my bottom bracket drop of 50 millimeters. Now we don't know exactly where that is going to be at, but we do know that somewhere on that line our bottom bracket will be there. All right. So we drew our wheelbase. This is our bottom bracket drop, 50 millimeters down. Now the next thing we're going to add to our drawing is going to be our chainstay length. All right. So the chainstay we're going to use on this is 445. So I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to look for 445 millimeters. There's 445 millimeters. So I'm going to go from my rear axle and look for where 445 hits that line, that bottom bracket drop line. And my 445 millimeters is right about here. So I know that that dot right there that I just made, that is going to be my bottom bracket center. Now I actually have a bottom bracket here that goes in the bikes, and I'm actually going to place that over it and give it a good trace. If you have something round at home or with you that you can trace to put a bottom bracket shell in there, that would be awesome. You know, it doesn't need to be that big of a circle, but there you go, there's a bottom bracket. We got our bottom bracket drop. So that, our third thing was our chainstay length. And I said it was 445 millimeters. Great. Now that we've got that drawn, we can actually draw where our chainstay would be. Our chainstay would go from the rear axle to the middle of the bottom bracket. There's our chainstay. Now, after we've drawn our chainstay, what we can actually do is we can use our protractor, our really fancy protractors, and the next thing that we can add to this is going to be our C-tube angle, and the C-tube angle on this bike is 75.5 degrees. So our fourth step would be our C-tube angle, and that's 75.5 degrees. So I'm going to use my protractor. I'm going to put my center right here on my protractor over the center of my bottom bracket and line that up. And I can actually kind of see through this paper because it's so thin. And then I'm going to measure here, 75.5 is going to be right around there. So I'm going to just draw a really long line for my C-tube angle. I'm going to connect the bottom bracket to that little dot that I made, and I'm going to just lightly draw that all the way up. So there's my C-tube angle at 75.5. Now that we've drawn our C-tube angle, the next thing that we can draw is our C-tube length. And the C-tube length on this medium-sized bike is 410. So step 5 is our C-tube length. And I said that was 410 millimeters. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to measure along that line 410 millimeters and mark it off. So there's 40, 41, 410 millimeters is right here. So this would be where the actual top of the C-tube would be. So there's my C-tube length. All right. Now, after we've drawn our C-tube length, we can connect our seat stay line back here. This isn't necessarily a science to this one. We just need some sort of straight line. And I'm going to go down about an inch, which is my thumb. I'm just going to put a line here and just connect my seat stays to that. So this is just kind of a quick, easy line. You can draw in your seat stay. There's no real dimension on that. So I'll put number 6 was seat stay. And there's no dimension to that. All right. So now what we're going to do is we've got the back end of the bike done. Now we're going to work on the front end of the bike. And on the front end of the bike, the first thing we need to do is we've got this place where our axle is. So we're going to use that axle point as kind of our grounding point for the front end of the bike. And from the front end of the bike, we have our rake on this Fox fork, or the rake or the offset, and that's 44 millimeters. So what I want to do is I'm going to draw a line backwards. That's 44 millimeters. And this line will be, this point will be kind of where our head tube angle will go. All right, so this point here, we're gonna actually use our, well, let me write it up here on the board. So number 7 was our offset or rake, and that was 45 millimeters. Number 8, this is going to be our head tube angle. We've gone back 45 millimeters, and now we're going to do our head tube angle. The head tube angle on this bike is 67 degrees. So head tube angle at 67 degrees. So again, I'm going to take my protractor, I'm going to put the dot here over this line, and that will allow me to figure out where my head tube angle needs to go. So 60, 65, 67, it's right around there. All right, so now I got this dot here, and then this other dot that I measured out. This line is going to be my head tube angle. All right, so we've got our head tube angle now. We know where our front axle is. We've got our offset. So our next thing that we're going to put on here is actually our axle to crown. And the length on one of these Fox 120 millimeter treble forks, the axle to crown is 530.2. So I'm going to put axle to crown 530.2 millimeters. So again, I want to use my tape measure, and I want to measure from here and find where 530.2 hits our head tube angle. So here, 500, 530, 530.2, and it looks like my head tube is pretty high up here. All right, so I hope I have room on this piece of paper for my bike. All right, so I'm going to just draw a light line right there. That's my axle to crown length. And now after our axle to crown length, we can actually draw in our head tube. So number 10 will be head tube length. And the head tube length on this bike is 105 millimeters, so it's pretty short. 105 millimeters is just over 4 inches, so I'm hoping I can fit those 4 inches up here. Let's see. Again, I'm going to take my tape measure, measuring up from the bottom. This is the bottom of the head tube, top of the axle to crown. And I'm going to go 105, which is right here. Thank goodness I can actually fit. So I'm going to extend my head tube length really quickly just so it gets up there. All right, cool. Now we've got our head tube. What we can do now is draw our effective top tube length, and then we can connect some lines, and then your bike frame is about done. So number 11 would be effective top tube. And hopefully, if we did this right, we should be on track. The effective top tube for this is about 601 millimeters. So the effective top tube is a horizontal line from our seat tube angle to our head tube angle. So our hope is that this imaginary angle line here coming backwards is going to be around 601, and let's see how close we are to that. All right. I'm about a centimeter off. I have 59. So I lost 10 millimeters somewhere. I'm not quite sure where that happened, but that's okay. So I'm going to connect this across. All right. And then we're going to draw our down tube line. There's no measurement for this or anything. It's just kind of a general line. I'm going to go from the center of the bottom bracket about up here to the center of my head tube. There's no real measurement behind it. It's kind of one of those lines that just gets put in after the fact. All right. So there's the skeleton of our bike frame. This has all the dimensions in it. The next video you'll see in just a second, we'll start adding the tube to it. But before we get to that, what I want to do is I want to actually start labeling these things just to make sure I understand everything. So I'm going to use this dark marker, and I'm actually going to go through these dimensions and actually start drawing them all on your sheet of paper, and you should be doing the same thing. So I'll probably do a really quick fast forward right here, but you should be able to do the same thing on yours, okay? All right, I got the bike frame labeled. My next step is I'm going to start drawing the actual tubes on there.